Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody. It is very exciting to be coming to you today to talk a little bit about one of my absolute favorite topics, motivation and satisfaction. Many of you know that this is an area of research for myself, and so I'm excited to share with you today about this idea of motivation and satisfaction. And we're going to videocast and kind of talk through a couple of things today regarding motivation and satisfaction and supplementing the material for the week. I posted 2 articles on our Blackboard site. I'd encourage you to take a look at those and to read them. Good insights in both of them. One is practitioner-oriented from Harvard Business, and the other is an article that myself and Dr. Ann Hurd wrote a couple of years back. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into our topic today, motivation and satisfaction. And I want to share this quote with you from the Gallup organization. It says, polls estimate that if companies could get 3.7% more work out of each employee, the equivalent of 18 more minutes of work for each 8-hour shift, the gross domestic product in the United States would swell by $355 billion, twice the total GDP of Greece. Think about that for a minute. If we could just motivate folks to work 18 more minutes every day, every shift that they work, the gross domestic product in the United States would swell by $355 billion. That is with a B, ladies and gentlemen, $1 billion a year. That is amazing. That is an amazing number. Well, this begs the question, why in the world can't we do that? And what do we actually know about moving the needle on motivation? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Specifically, how do you motivate somebody? What are the mechanisms of motivation? How do we actually get folks to be motivated in their work a little more? And we need to break this concept down a little bit and talk about it in terms of some chunks. The first thing we need to do is disentangle, if you will, the jingle jangle of motivation and satisfaction. So there is this argument that, well, perhaps these things are the same thing. They're synonymous with one another. They're completely overlapping. Well, we have to ask the question, well, what is motivation? What exactly does this mean? And I might pose this to you. What is motivation? Why would you do anything? Why would you work harder? So the idea here is that we ask people to work 18 more minutes more in every shift. Let's just take that for an example. What does that actually mean? What is motivation? We're going to talk a little bit about this. And then are motivation and satisfaction the same thing? Well, I would suggest to you that they're not. They're actually quite different. In fact, they are linked in terms of a statistical relationship, and there's a statistical relationship between satisfaction and performance. So there's this idea that satisfaction and performance are linked at 0.30. Well, what does that actually mean? Let's take a look at the next slide. If we take a look at the relationship that is featured in our text, figure 9.1, this is a graph of the relationship between leadership, job satisfaction, and performance, and it came out of an incredibly well-cited research study, the impact of human resource management practices on turnover, productivity, and corporate financial performance. So this particular study looked at actual corporate financial performance. It appeared in the Academy of Management Journal, issue number 38, volume 4. And this, take a look at all of the linkages and all of the arrows, and what exactly is this saying here, right? Well, let's start at follower job satisfaction for a moment. If you take a look right there at the bottom, kind of the second level up, follower job satisfaction seems to be related or have some kind of causal relationship with follower retaliation and follower turnover. Well, that's not too surprising. We move up and see that it also has a relationship with organizational citizenship behaviors and follower performance. And then we look over and we see leader behavior, something that we've been studying about in this class pretty significantly. Leader behavior also has a relationship on follower performance. If we just follow that triad there, leadership behavior to follower job satisfaction to organizational citizenship behavior to follower performance, we see We see the linkage here, that leader behavior is somehow linked, is somewhat linked to this idea of satisfaction. And satisfaction, if we look all the way up through the models, is related to follower performance. If we follow the line out all the way across the article, you'll see that unit or team performance also comes right back down to follower satisfaction, and it creates this kind of cyclical model. I think it's pretty fair to say that there is a relationship between satisfaction and performance, but that relationship is perhaps moderate at best, right? 0.30 is like suggesting that there's a relationship between maybe 30%, right? That it's only moderately related. In terms of understanding what does that actually mean, right? Because I think that's the goal of understanding this. We can only actually predict performance at 9%. So satisfaction is only predictive of performance at about 9%. Well, there's a lot of unexplained variance there. A lot of unexplained variance. Let's move forward and figure out, well, how do we actually get into moving the needle on this? So let's define our focus a little bit. Let's take a step back. Motivation is anything that provides direction, intensity, and persistence to behavior. So we can think about motivation as something that gives some kind of direction, it gives some kind of intensity or magnitude, and something that prolongs or persists that particular behavior. Motivation per se is not directly observable. It must be inferred from the behavior. We can't actually see motivation, but we actually see the behavior that's taking place for the person. Performance, then, is behavior directed toward organizational mission or goals. It differs from effectiveness and it differs from motivation. Performance is that specific behavior. Motivation is not seen. Performance is actually what we see someone do. Job satisfaction, to be clear, is how much someone likes a specific kind of job or work activity in a general practitioner sense. So motivation, performance, and job satisfaction are actually three different, very separate contexts. They're actually three separate focuses. Each one of them brings with it a very rich background in literature. But to be clear, motivation, performance, and satisfaction are actually not the same things. So, what are some ways in which we can kind of understand motivation? Our text talks about three different areas. The first, they talk about need theories and cognitive theories, and then understanding kind of strategic theories of leadership, or building blocks of motivation. So on the left-hand side, we have someone who has some needs here. We can understand that when someone is hungry, they don't have shelter, that perhaps their motivation is going to be a little bit different. There's this idea of cognitive or rational appraisal theories, and then this idea of building block theories and strategic theories. And we're going to walk through all three of these in the next few slides. Let's start with the idea of the need theories of motivation. And probably one of the more famous need theories of motivation is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow broke down human needs into kind of three basic areas. There was this general or basic needs area, which was the first level of needs. And then the second level was this idea of psychological needs. And then the top was self-fulfillment needs. Well, let's stop for a minute and break down what does this actually mean. So in terms of basic needs, there's physiological needs and safety needs. And Maslow would suggest that everyone starts at the most basic level, at the physiological needs. If you've ever been thirsty before, you know how motivating of a factor it can be to be extremely parched. If you've ever been hungry, if you've ever been sleep deprived, you know that it is a very motivating place to be, no doubt about it. Once we have food and water and warmth and rest, as Maslow might point out, he would suggest that once those basic needs are met, that we move up into safety needs, a sense of security and safety. If you've ever really been scared, you know what kind of a motivating or kind of paralyzing place this can actually be. It overtakes everything. The only thing that you're concerned about is safety and security. You know, if I'm being chased down the street and someone is attacking me, I'm not really concerned about how I look, am I? I'm not really concerned about if somebody's, if I look a little funny, or if I'm running kind of crazy, or if I'm screaming. What I'm concerned about is that my safety is better. And that goes for my family's safety as well. When your safety and security are at risk, it tends to be an overwhelming motivational psychological state, no doubt about it. But once our physiological needs are met and our safety needs are met, Maslow suggests that we move to the next area, belongingness and love. That at that point, intimate relationships with friends and family and those around us become very important to us, and belonging with others becomes a critical need for us. And then he suggests we move up to prestige and feeling of accomplishment when we move into esteem needs and self-actualization. Well, you might be asking yourself, what does this have anything to do with business? What does this have anything to do with meeting people where they are? Well, I would suggest that many of us work in places that meet our physiological needs. There's perhaps a place to go to the restroom. Perhaps we get adequate rest at night, that we have adequate food and water. But some of us don't always feel psychologically safety or socially safe. And so when we work in places that don't allow us a sense of psychological safety or physical safety, it can take over everything, right? It could be also that we don't make enough money to pay our bills. And so food, water, and warmth and rest are actually quite salient needs in our own life. So I think the interesting thing about what Maslow is saying here is that we actually can't jump these hierarchies. We can't jump levels. We can't be hungry and look for prestige and a feeling of accomplishment. No. All of our energy is directed towards finding the next place we're going to get our meal, or finding a place to lay down and rest. If we're in a place where we don't feel safe, then we're actually not moving up into belongingness and love. We actually are looking for a sense of safety. This explains a lot of behavior in the workplace. When people don't feel safe, they tend to not think of anything else. The next level, I think, is probably what's missing most in organizations today, a sense of belongingness and love, this idea of intimate relationships and friends. And I would take that a little bit further to contribution and a feeling of value, feeling of meaningfulness in somebody's work, right? That how many of us have longed to talk with our supervisors about how we're doing, getting not critical feedback, but developmental feedback about things that we could take next steps on, ways in which we could contribute to the organization. How many of us thirst and long to have conversations of value and contribution about our work to the organization? So we're unable to give our full potential until we move into that next area. And this is the real area of HRD here, where we can actually make the greatest difference. I'd encourage you to take a look a little more deeply at this idea of need theories of motivation. But certainly this one particular perspective doesn't explain everything. There are others to take a look at. For example, expectancy theory. So expectancy theory is kind of this rational or cognitive theory of motivation. Let's just follow it from beginning to end here. There's this idea of effort, right, that we give towards our performance. And this effort to performance expectancy, a ratio that can actually get calculated it ranges from 0 to 1. Take a look at the top of the picture there. It ranges from 0 to 1.0, right? And then the performance to outcome expectancy, which is, well, how well is it expected that I'm going to actually do, right? And it too ranges from 0 to 1, 0.0 to 1.0. There are lots of things that factor in here. The environment, our own ability. There are things that both constrain and affect our performance. All of these things are very contextually based. At the end of the day, our effort to performance expectancy and our performance to outcome expectancy equals out the sum of all the outcomes, or the variance of the outcomes, which is this kind of number that we might get. Here's what this theory is suggesting in a nutshell, that motivation is a function of cognition. It's a function of how we think through things. How well do we actually think we can do, to how well that actually happens, either now or in the past, and then what are the outcomes of the expectancy that we might have here. So this is a cognitive or a rational theory of motivation. And again, I would encourage you to take a look at our text to see what our authors have to say about this. And I would encourage you to take a look at the 2 articles that we posted online that might go a little further into this idea. The last theory of motivation that we're going to talk about today is this idea of situational theory, or this kind of building block, this strategic area of theory. Situational theories do really 5 kinds of things. The first is they clarify and specify what behaviors are important in any particular situation. Many of you are familiar with this idea of situational leadership. We need to determine if those behaviors are currently being punished, rewarded, or ignored. Within the context of the situation, we have to understand, why is someone actually doing what's going on? Are they being punished for something, rewarded, or are they being ignored? We have to find out what followers actually find rewarding and punishing. We have to be wary of creating perceptions of inequity when administering any kinds of tailored rewards, and we cannot limit ourselves to administering organizationally sanctioned rewards and punishment. Situational theories would suggest that we must take into the context the situation around us, and then as a leader, act in a way that will motivate individuals based on that particular context or situation. Been a lot written on this particular topic, particularly in the popular press around things like situational leadership from Hershey and Blanchard. Well, let's take a look and see, is there this link between motivation and performance? Well, let's see what people see. Let's see what people say here. So why do people leave organizations? Let's just take a look at this particular chart. Well, it looks like people leave. 34% of people leave based on limited recognition and praise, 29% based on compensation, 13% limited authority, 8% personality conflicts, and 16% otherwise. Well, let's take a look at the other side of that, which is, why do people actually stay? Well, these are pretty interesting. Promises of long-term employment, supports training and education, hires and keeps hardworking and smart people, encourages fun collegial relationships, bases job evaluations on innovation. So all of these things, what are you seeing here, right? You see the opposite, right? So why do people leave? Well, limited recognition and praise. And then why do people stay? You see that actually operationalized over on the other side. Limited recognition and praise looks like support, keeping smart people, encouraging fun, basing job evaluations on innovation, promises of long-term employment. This idea of why people stay or why people leave is actually at opposite ends of a particular continuum. If we move forward, we might think about, what are the perspectives of satisfaction? And we need to think about satisfaction in kind of 2 areas of affectivity, both negative affectivity and positive affectivity. And in the research literature, this idea of affectivity is not all that well researched in the HRD literature, although both of them have long, promising, and very rich streams of literature in areas of like psychology or sociology. Affectivity refers to one's tendency to react to stimuli in a consistent emotional manner. We might take a look at HERZBERG's 2-factor theory for a second. We might look at this particular picture and say, well, how would you, if you were going to start building a house, what are the things in which you might begin to build first? Well, nobody would pick out their lampshades or the faucet knobs or the door handles before we've actually poured the concrete or before we've actually set the walls up to be built. There are things that must come first. There's a sense of scaffolding that must come before we put on the details. And that's exactly what HERZBERG's 2-factor theory is really kind of talking about. HERZBERG suggested that there are both hygiene factors and motivators. Hygiene factors are those things like supervision, working conditions, coworkers, pays, policies, procedures, and job security, and that those things lend themselves from dissatisfied to not satisfied. Hygiene factors must be in place but are not sufficient for satisfaction per se. So they are a condition of satisfaction, but they do not guarantee satisfaction. Motivators, on the other hand, are things like achievement, recognition, the work itself, responsibility, and advancement and growth. The crux of what HERZBERG is saying here is that we have to have, before we move into areas of being satisfied with our work, we must have a sense of good supervision. Working conditions must be adequate. Our coworkers must be friendly and willing to help. Our pay must be sufficient enough to take money off the table as an issue. Policies and procedures should be rational, should be understood, and job security must be in place. And that when we have those things in place, that then and only then can we actually move to motivating someone. Up to that point, there's a sense of hygiene in terms of maintenance and taking care of, right? HERZBERG's two-factor theory is actually used quite frequently in the literature on leadership to explain why employees become motivated or why they don't become. And this is a really good diagnostic tool. For looking to motivate someone, maybe we should first look at hygiene factors and make sure that hygiene factors are in fact in place before we try to motivate someone. You cannot motivate, just like Maslow said, you cannot move to self-actualization before you attend to things like physiological needs and safety needs. We cannot jump those layers. HERZBERG here is saying that you must attend to hygiene factors before you actually attend to motivating factors. That you will waste your time putting in recognition plans and achievement plans and helping people grow if first you do not supervise them well, if you don't pay them enough money to take money off the issue as a table, or if people feel that their job is in jeopardy. Herzberg's theory is used so frequently in the research today. So here's a question that we might have. Well, is that all? Is that it? Is there anything else beyond motivation and satisfaction and performance? And in fact, there is this emerging area of employee engagement, which will be the focus of our next podcast.